Hi everybody, and welcome to Album Analysis. I know it's been a while, but welcome back everybody, and today we're going to talk about disco. Well, sort of. We're going to talk about Queen's 1982 album Hot Space, which was their dip into a kind of disco sound after disco had already ended. It was a controversial album, but is it really that bad? Or is it good? Or is it kind of depend on who you are? Let's get into it. So what was going on in the world at the time Queen's foray into the disco/dance sound was released? Queen's last album had been 1980's The Game, which featured the hit single Another One Bites the Dust. You've heard it. Come on. Even if you're not familiar with Queen, you've heard Another One Bites the Dust. This song, which was written by the bassist John Deacon, gained airplay on not only regular rock stations, but also R&B stations. They dipped into a completely different sound and gained a whole new fan base who were sometimes confused that the rest of Queen's stuff didn't sound like Another One Bites the Dust. And so they kind of were like, hey, what if we did kind of more of that? And Freddie and John were like, yeah, let's do more of that. John had written Another One Bites the Dust, so he was interested in that different kind of more bass heavy actually sound. And Freddie was inspired by a lot of the dance music that was being played at the time in specifically gay clubs, which he frequented from time to time. On the other side of things, Brian May and Roger Taylor were not so happy with this idea, but they kind of went along with it. But it led to some friction in the band, not for the first time and not for the last time. But yeah. So, in the 1970s, disco was very popular. As anyone who was around the 70s would know, I was not around the 70s, so I just know this from things like watching The Get Down, which is an excellent series, by the way. Giancarlo Esposito is a minister in that show. But in the 70s, a lot of people were really into disco, but when anything is really popular, regardless of, some people love disco, some people hate disco, but when anything is very popular at a time, it gets oversaturated to the point that then people go in the other direction where they really hate it. So disco was very popular and then it burned out. And this kind of culminated in an event at the stadium that the Chicago White Sox played at, having the disco demolition night, in which a DJ who apparently refused to play disco songs invited people to bring their disco albums, or I guess disco albums they had inherited or purchased, to destroy them in order to have the death of disco. NPR does an interesting article on this in which they kind of argued that maybe there were some undertones of prejudice because a lot of disco artists were African American, and so it kind of, you could look at it both ways. Is it that because disco was oversaturated and not everyone's cup of tea, or maybe there was some undertones at the time, at least specifically with this disco demolition night event. But either way, that was kind of looked at, and that was in 1979, so that was looked at as the night disco died, if you wanted to put a time period on it, because everyone kind of got fed up with what was the popular thing at the time, and everyone was like, we hate disco now. Even if they liked it before, now they hate it. So Hot Space, instead, comes out a couple years later. It's being recorded around 81. It was released in 82, so at that point, disco is not popular anymore, and it's still in, the backlash period. It's not, whereas, today, people might, still put on disco stuff. Ironically, it hadn't gone into, the hipster time period yet. People were still kind of angry about it, but, yeah. And, one other thing that influenced Hot Space, before we get into it track by track, is that in 1980, there was also another important event in the music world, and that is the death of John Lennon at the end of 1980. So that really, in the similar way to the way the Manson murders ended the kind of summer of love in a lot of ways, the death of John Lennon really kind of put a pall over rock music because, the Beatles were so influential. And now here's, one of them at the young age of 40, getting gunned down in this senseless act of violence. So it definitely reverberates through this album in a lot of ways, and perhaps that is one of the reasons why they decided to go for overall kind of maybe a more uplifting sound to try to maybe carry people out of that kind of depression that had come as a result of Lennon's death. So I don't know. It could go either way. I think there were a lot of different influences at the time leading into the recording of Hot Space, which was recorded in Germany. And the one other thing I just wanted to say is that Queen were not the only people who were kind of dipping into a disco sound around this time. On Phil Collins' debut solo album, Face Value, there is a track called I'm Not Moving, which has a similar kind of sound to some of the stuff on Hot Space. However, Face Value didn't go with that same sound throughout, although it does have a lot of R&B, funk influences, just like Hot Space does, but it doesn't go all the way into like kind of a disco sound, except for I'm Not Moving. Fun fact, Face Value also references the death of John Lennon by having a cover of the song Tomorrow Never Knows. And so you can, and that was not the only one. There is a whole list of songs about the death of John Lennon, and that will future video perhaps. But let's get into Hot Space. You guys are here for Hot Space, and that is what we are going to talk about. So let's talk about the first song. The first song is Staying Power, written by Freddie. And this starts us off with kind of the idea of what we are going for throughout the rest of the album. This song is kind of the epitome of Roger Taylor's complaint that the songs sound like what is being played in a gay club, because it's a song about meeting someone, kind of love at first sight, attraction at first sight maybe, and just kind of, wanting to get them to know them better, wanting to have kind of a casual fling. He, dipped his toe into that, in this song, as in real life. And it's not going to be the last time we have this theme in this album. But Staying Power, it's kind of bawdy, it's tame by today's standards, with the stuff like, but then 20 years from now, people will be looking at, like, Cardi B saying, oh, people were upset about that, that's so tame. But this was a little bit bawdy for the time. So Staying Power, yeah. Then we go to Dancer, which is by Brian May. Brian, like I said before, was not a fan of this project, was not a fan of this new sound, and you can tell on some of his tracks on this album. This is the song that he seemed to write to try to get into the new sound, but you can tell his heart is not in it. It's basically it's kind of similar to Staying Power theme-wise, because it's about somebody's going to a dance club, they're meeting somebody, they're really good at dancing, they want to dance with them, and yeah, that's Dancer. It's exactly what it says on the tin. It's about a dancer, but you can kind of tell that Brian is not. He's like, okay, here you go, Dancer. That's what I got for you. However, then we have one of the singles from this album, Back Chat, which was written by John. So again, like in the Queen breakdown, John was very much in favor of the new sound, and perhaps one of the people really pushing the new sound. And again, it's very bass heavy, which a lot of times our bassists don't get featured as much as we would like, and so it's always nice to see some bass player appreciation. And so, this song is interesting because, and I couldn't find like an official source on this. It's a bunch of stuff where people read to it perhaps, but it seems like it is possibly a valid interpretation. Backchat, it's written to sound like it's about a relationship where the person who is narrating the song just keeps getting back chat from the person they're in love with. The person never lets them, get the last word in. They always have to be right. And And so, which does happen in relationships. However, a lot of people have read into this that this was not about a romantic relationship. John Deacon was married to the same person for a very long time and had, I think, like 7 children or something like that. Like, very long-term, stable relationship. So a lot of people's theory is that Backchat is not about anyone that John Deacon dated or married, that it's about him and Brian, that it's like Brian was trying to tell him what to do and push him to the side. And it seemed like John Deacon kind of has the reputation for being one of the quieter people in the band, more soft-spoken. He likes to do his own thing. And Brian can be, maybe, he likes his own, he likes to have his own way, perhaps. So there's that kind of, butting heads, perhaps, and that seems to be what Backchat is about. For the record, I met Brian May and he was lovely, so this is not a reflection on what I think that Brian May's personality was, is, or ever will be. It just seems to be that's what the consensus seems to be about what was going on at the time. Interestingly enough, in the music video, they are in some kind of like industrial warehouse. It kind of looks like Metropolis Zone from Sonic the Hedgehog 2, if you've seen that. So it's I don't know why they went with that, but it's not the end of interesting music videos for this album. I'll just say that much. Speaking of which, now we get into song number 4, Body Language. Remember I said that there are some bawdy songs on this album? Well, this one's even bawdier than Staying Power. This song, it was released on the American version of the Greatest Hits album, which there was the the Greatest Hits US, and there's the British Greatest Hits, and then the Platinum edition released the British Greatest Hits. And I apologize for if you can hear that siren in the background. I apologize. That is someone coming to get me because I like hot space. Okay, so body language. All right, so this, like I said, this song is very bawdy. This was on the US version of the Greatest Hits, and so as a little 9-year-old, I went out with like my allowance, and I bought. Did I say 9-year-old? Did I say okay? We'll cut that part. Okay. Anyway, so when I was a little 9-year-old, I can talk. I went with my like allowance or whatever, and I got a tape of the Greatest Hits US, which I was very disappointed to find out that Bohemian Rhapsody isn't on Greatest Hits US because they put it on Classic Queen, even though Classic Queen is mainly the later stuff, but instead, they have Body Language on there, and I was not sure what I was listening to. And so I would skip over it because I was like, I don't know what is going on with that. Then, when I was 14, I got back into Queen. I was like, let me take out that tape, and I'm going to listen to it again. And then I listened to it, and I was like, that song is dirty, isn't it? Yes, it was. And if there's any doubt, the music video was banned on MTV for being dirty. And again, it's by today's standards, it's pretty tame by today's standards, but by the standards of 1982, MTV had just started in 1981, I believe, so they were not ready for Body Language yet. I don't know if anyone's ever been ready for Body Language. But yeah, so again, this song, I'm kind of dancing around what the song's about, but you can probably guess what it's about by now. It's about meeting somebody, and it's not about, I don't know, if you go back to like Elvis's A Little Less Conversation, that's basically, yeah, Freddie wants to have a little less conversation. Then let's, we're not flipping it over just yet. We have one last song on this album, and you know who we haven't heard yet from? You know who we haven't heard from yet on this album? Mr. Roger Taylor, as they say in Invisible Man. This song is called Action This Day, and this is Roger's first song on the album, and it shows a different side of the concerns at the time, whereas the first couple songs are all about interpersonal relationships, good, bad, and body. Action This Day is about making a change in the world, so kind of going back onto some of the crises that were happening at the time. And it's also an interesting pun because action can mean political action, which is what Roger seems to be writing about in this song. But action can also mean the body stuff that we're talking about. So I don't know if that was an intentional pun, but it's an interesting way to end side one when it was a lot of like interpersonal relationship songs, whether, romantic relationships, physical relationships, or band relationships in the case of Backchat. And then we kind of go to the greater sphere. It's like inside the band, we may not all be getting along, but outside in the world, there are serious issues going on. Then we are gonna continue with that idea in the second side. Okay, so the first song on the second side is another Brian May song, and it's called Put Out the Fire. And this song is about gun control. So yes, we have pivoted significantly. The first verse of this song, the first verse of this song, it alludes potentially to John Lennon's murder, and and then in the second verse also talks about other, senseless acts of violence, people being upset that their significant other is cheating on them, and then, going out and rashly injuring them, particularly with firearms, in this respect. And it's a very kind of sarcastic song, but it's also, like I said, it goes back to taking action on important issues. So this is, Brian's feelings about like what people should be focusing on in the wake of these crises in the world. And obviously we've definitely, now we've come to an agreement on the gun control debate. Like, there's no discussion about this ever. No one disagrees with this we all came to a consensus a very long time ago, back in 1982. No, it's still a thorny issue with a lot of debate going on. But so, if you get anything out of the fire, number one is don't act rashly, because if you do something out of anger, it can lead to repercussions that people are still talking about, 20, 30, 40 years from now. So walk away. And again, now, so we're going to continue to talk about Mr. John Lennon with the song Life is Real, and then in parentheses, Song for Lennon, which is Freddie's take on things. Whereas Brian tackled the issue by looking at the societal influences that may have led up to this gun homicide, Freddie looks at the influence that Lennon has had on him and how he hopes to bring that inspiration forward into the future and keep Lennon's influence alive. The song sounds a lot like, especially the stuff on Plastic Ono Band, the more melodic songs on Plastic Ono Band, and so it's very much in the vein of, a Lennon song. And so and like I said, there were a lot of Lennon tribute songs that came out in the early 80s. So that's, again, like that, maybe that is a future video at some point, but we'll leave it there now that, again, this, Freddie was very inspired by Lennon. I don't believe they ever met, although they did have a friend in common with Elton John. So what could have been? Can you imagine those three out on the town? That would be crazy. But as far as I know, they never met in person, but they did, but Freddie did, Freddie dedicated a cover of the song Imagine to John on the Lennon, that is not Deacon, on the day that Lennon was shot or the day afterwards. There's like kind of a rough live copy of it floating around. It was out there back in like the Napster days, but it's out there somewhere. All right. Anyway, let's go on to another single. This is Calling All Girls, also by Mr. Roger Taylor. This one it's an interesting music video because it's got some of the themes that they looked into later with like some of the stuff off of the works and some of the themes that they had going on there. They're in like a futuristic world and Big Brother is like stopping people from falling in love. So Freddie ends up in a cage and people are like hitting him with sticks, and then the other guys in Queen have to go save him from robots. It's very strange. But this song is basically about people sending out a message of love. So again, like the idea of taking action, spreading inspiration, and, you know, trying to help other people and connecting on some kind of maybe like even worldwide scale. Then we go to Las Palabras de Amor, the words of love, which I butchered. Listen, I just finished my Spanish 2 class and it is hard. So if you speak Spanish, I applaud you because those conjugations are hard. But so Brian was very appreciative of his Latin American fans. Queen was very big in Latin America. And so he decided to write a song to honor them and the band's connection to them. And literally just, means the words of love, but in Spanish. And this is a song about, romantic relationship. And it's much more in the style of, the kind of stuff that Brian usually writes. This second side is really not disco-y at all. The first side is way more disco-y than the second side. So this is more your kind of standard Queen song. And this was on the Platinum Edition Classic Hits 2, I believe. All right, then we go over to Cool Cat, which, okay, we're back in disco now. This was a Freddie and Deacon collaboration. And this, it's just, again, this one, I don't know, this one doesn't speak to me as much. It's kind of jazzy, kind of cool. It's kind of, again, just like Dancer, it is kind of like what it says on the tin. It's about a cool cat. All right. You all know, remember I said everyone knows Another One Bites the Dust? You all know this one too. Even if you don't know that, you know it. Then we've got Under Pressure, which is credited as Queen and David Bowie for the authorship. But I have seen a lot of places that this was primarily written by Roger Taylor. So again, if that's wrong, I apologize, but I feel like I've seen that a lot of places. This is the big hit single. Everyone knows this. Vanilla Ice ripped off the sound from this and then tried to act like it was different and that he had never heard Under Pressure or whatever. But this is the one you all know. Everyone dances along to this when you hear it. And this is one of the dancey songs that seem to work on a larger level with more people. Because again, like this became a huge hit. Everyone knows this song, whether it was because of Queen, whether it was because of David Bowie, whether it was because the two of them together, or just something about the song itself. This really resonated with people. And this was a popular song on a way less popular album. The video for this doesn't have any of the band or Bowie in it because they were both touring and they didn't have time to make a video. So the video is just a bunch of like buildings falling down and stuff like that. It's a bunch of stock footage. But it works. Anyway, so everyone, like I said, everyone knows this song, and this ends on one of the big themes of the album, which is the idea of like we all need to help each other because we're all under pressure at the same time. The only thing that is going to, stop us from being torn apart is love. And basically you can make a change in the world. It kind of goes back to, Action This Day. to put out the fire in the idea of taking action on a specific issue, and basically the rest of the album. So, in summary, this album it is known as Queen's disco album, and it was one of the people like to say this was one like kind of the nails in the coffin for Queen's popularity in America, although a lot of times people point the finger at the video for I Want to Break Free when people, lost their minds over Queen being in drag for reasons that I don't entirely understand. I mean, I understand why they were in drag, but why people lost their mind about it is what I don't understand. I mean, they weren't even in drag the whole video. There was a whole thing where, like, Freddie was, like, down in a mine shaft, and there was a ballet, and so, it's a good video. I like it. But yeah, but basically, like, I don't know. The public is fickle, and so while Queen still remained pretty popular in England, they kind of dropped off in America up until Live Aid, when everyone was like, hey, Queen, I remember that band. And then people got into them again, and that was their last tour, but not their last album. For that, take a look at Innuendo. But so if you have any thoughts on Hot Space, do you love it? Do you hate it? Did I miss something important about one of the songs on here? Let me know. I have a soft spot for this album. I'm not a big fan of like Cool Cat or Dancer, but everything else, like sometimes if you are in the mood for just something that is, kind of poppy, but then is also going to make you think, then it's a good album to just listen to if you want to be either, if you're doing Zumba or if you want to be kind of depressed, it's going to be a good album for that. And, yeah. So do I think that disco is going to make a comeback? Possibly. You never know. Everything old is new again. Bell bottoms came back. Disco could come back. Listen to Hot Space. Let me know what you think. Watch the Get Down. Let me know what you think. And it's good to be back. And like I said, if you have any suggestions for albums that you want me to take a look at, put them in the comments. If you have anything that I missed, like I said, put it in the comments. And support the Mercury Phoenix Trust if you can. Hope everyone's doing well. Stay safe. Be good. Hug your pets. Adopt, don't shop. And have a good one. Bye.